Power Talks, empowering you through the voice of truth with your host, Dr. Joel Hunter.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Joel Hunter, host of Power Talks, empowering you through the voice of truth. On today's program, Executive Director of Lyft Orlando, Eddie Moreton, one of the giants of our city, and Phil Hissam, founder and director of Polis Institute, one of the architects of our city, are here to talk about what is being done and what is yet to be accomplished when it comes to breaking the cycle of poverty in our area. And I'm looking forward to hearing from these great leaders how we all can help. You know, it's said in Jeremiah 29:7 that in the well-being of the city will be our well-being. We're here as exiles. We're kind of passing through on our way to heaven, but it's pretty important we do what we can, especially for the marginalized, especially for those who are really having a difficult time. So let me get specific and then get more specific. Okay, Eddie, I want to get specific with you. You're heading up one of the premier success stories, or on the way to be the success stories of our region, and that is Lyft Orlando, that has addressed the wealth and the well-being and the health of a community in several different aspects. Can you bring us up to date on that project, what it is, how far we've come, and what we have yet to do?
Thank you, Joel. Thank you for the generous introduction and the chance to be here. It's especially a treat for me to be here with Phil. So much of what Lyft Orlando is and how it's matured from the beginning has been because of the wisdom and insights of Polis Institute, which you'll hear more about. Lyft Orlando, by definition, is a partnership between business leaders and residents for neighborhood revitalization. And for us, that really was born out of this sense of awareness that it seemed like those two groups represented missing voices in most conversations about social change. That residents in communities that needed investment were most often only seen as participants for programs, as folks expected to stand in a line and receive some benefit, and that business leaders were more often than not relegated to writing checks, that we were asked to give hard-earned money for someone to go do some great work, come back, tell the sob stories, ask for more, and we were doing that better than most cities in our country and not really moving the needle. And so in many ways, I don't dare to say we're in a success story yet because we're early in this experiment of can you take the power and resources of those who have influence in a community, who when usually engage in community revitalization, it may look like corporations and municipalities buying up undervalued assets, transforming an area that might experience blight, and we all call it a transformation, but the people who used to live there end up displaced, often in the weekly, monthly motels outside of town. Could you marry, however, the positive elements of that force for transformation and necessary investment with what we had seen, and Polis helped us learn, really move the needle in community health and well-being, which were grassroots efforts of residents taking ownership of their community, driving for a bright new future there. And so the last 5 years have been an ardent work in bringing these two unlikely partners to the same table and working to build trust and create engagement. And it's been incredibly humbling to see what started as a huge gap of trust and uncertainty that was well-founded given our history as a nation and a community, to really be a place of blossoming friendships and real brotherhood and camaraderie around hope for the future, while there's still a sense of healthy, well, let's see how this works out, right? Downtown is growing so fast. Can we get ahead of all this gentrification to make sure it benefits the people in these neighborhoods? So to date, we've got work that's occurred on the housing side to develop mixed income housing. Our first development, Pendana at West Lakes, was named by residents in that community. Pendana is a Swahili word that means to love one another. And it's provided a wonderful vision for the
What's
whole...
the word again?
Pendana.
Pendana.
It's a Swahili house name that was selected, and the kind of spirit of that and how we build community both in those apartments and around them is something that we are really proud of what the Lord is doing there. But future developments include senior family housing to provide affordable, high-quality housing. We're so excited. This development will open phase 2 at the end of the year, and it'll be the Taj Mahal. It's just really fantastic. Our core value is to create spaces that are really high quality, that affirm the dignity of residents and attract higher income families while retaining affordability to keep the families there.
Let me ask you about that, because I know that people listening might be thinking this is in the what was formerly known as the Paramore District.
It's nearby Paramore, just
nearby
on the other
Paramore.
side of OBT.
Okay. How do you? And I know something when you made this housing unit available and you had the applications. How many applications came in?
We had over 10,000 people inquire about living there. Lines outside the door for months.
And how many units available?
200.
Okay. So just I'm listening to this. I'm listening to this, and I'm thinking, okay, they're trying to make sure that this is not the typical gentrification process where the poor that have lived in the area are now excluded from the area because people with money came in and now they can afford to live downtown, which is a very attractive geography. How are you making sure that the affordable housing part stays open to the former residents, stays open to others who need that?
It's such a big part of the story, because the truth is, I like to tell partners, the one thing we'll all get asked 10 years from now, fair or not the question might be, is how many people who used to live there now. When in reality, you can't control people's choice of whether they stay within the boundaries of that neighborhood or move or relocate for their own reasons. But it is the right goal to have. And for us, it's one that both motivates and haunts us in everything that we do. Like, how do we create the proper amount of engagement that people feel these opportunities are for them and take ownership of these opportunities, take advantage of them, when at the same time, in the case of housing, fair housing rules don't allow you to provide preferred selective treatment. Like, I can't say, oh, you used to live here before, we're going to take your application first before we do. So I have rules that worked against me in doing that. And so a lot of our work was on the ground, much more relational, ahead of time. As soon as we knew we were doing the apartments, we were informing people, hey, these are coming online. Start getting your paperwork together. Make sure you're among the first to be able to apply. But it was a much more informal, relational, here's sharing of information, like, early marketing of the project, than it was sort of a structured selection process, because that's technically illegal. And so for us, it's been more about how do we have enough engagement that people feel they can trust in these new developments as something that is intended for them, and incentivized by that, their desire to stay in the neighborhood, remain, even if their present circumstances aren't entirely ideal, and they could, figure out how to move into some move-in special across town. But the ultimate campus, hopefully we'll do that from a physical environment, at least, from investing in early childhood education to after-school programming, an entire pipeline of schools and health and wellness. But ultimately, our goal is to see the wealth and well-being of the communities of West Lakes. And that West Lakes is the name of this area, renamed by residents. So everything west of OBT and east of John Young, south of 50, surrounding Camping Road Stadium, they decided to come together with one community identity to distinguish from Paramore and Washington Shores. And we're so excited to see that level of leadership on their behalf, because it's really showing a sense of hope and faith for the future.
Now, Phil, he said they decided to come together, and I know that's not an accident. There's a process that was set in place for that, and you are kind of the architect of that process. Could you tell us how you approached this area so that what would ultimately be done would come out of those conversations of the residents, and not just out of someone who knew nothing about the culture, the history, so on and so forth? How do you approach something like that?
The main thing is you need people who are investing in the process that believe it's important to hear from the people. Because if that's not the case, it takes a lot of time. Time is money to talk to people and try to talk to everybody. And so the group of business leaders that became Lift Orlando, before they had a name and an incorporated status, they had a rallying point around Florida Citrus Sports that does the events at the stadium. And Citrus Sports has a long-standing relationship with the community. Their CEO, Steve Hogan, really connected to community leaders around the stadium, really desiring to see a deeper commitment and real benefit around the stadium. So that's crucial. Like, he's kind of the heart of the origins of this story. And without that, and him being able to rally his peers in the business community to say, let's do something different, wouldn't have happened. And then, and as business leaders, they thought about it differently. They approached me because of some work we'd been doing, and we work in neighborhoods all over town, and gave them my 2 cents about what should be done, and said, if we spent a year listening to the community, we would really learn a lot. Now, for most people, and these are type A, get it done last week kind of people, they were like, well, okay, I think we can be patient. And I said, then the kicker was, but the whole process for what you seem like you want to do could take about 20 years. Now, at first they said, well, if it takes 20, we can do it in 5 or 10. Kind of whispering, but I think now they would probably say that a little differently, but it's that drive, tempered with a desire to do the right thing, because you want to have a healthy amount of impatience, but you want to do right by the people. And there was a genuine desire to not just tell a different story, but even on a national stage, tell a different stadium story. Stadiums don't tend to be good for the neighborhoods they're in. So there was a big vision. So people like that want a big vision. They want to see, are we innovating something? So I'm laboring on that point because that sets the stage for me making an ask to say, if you do this right, it's going to cost some money. And threw out a number which was significantly more than I'd been scrapping together, because I'd done it the other way, piecemealing it together, and was kind of tired of doing that myself. And wanted to go a little deeper in to hire residents to do it. And so made the ask, and as business leaders, they were like, well, it sounds like, I can't believe you're going to do that much for that little. Rather than if you go to a nonprofit or a church who's strapped themselves, they're like, that's crazy. We can't spend that much money. But they saw the value in it. And then the process started. So that was a lot of intro to the process being, we worked with a couple of local, very grassroots nonprofits, Collins Recreation, which is a Jones High School football star who's worked for the city and just loves people in the community and does little events. He was in, and we started working with his fraternity brothers to do on a volunteer basis. And in that process, found residents who needed some work and had the capacity and interest to do this work. What the work is, knocking on every door in the community, talking to people about not just what's wrong with the community, what's right.
Let me ask about that, because when you're talking with the residents of the community, both of you, I know both of you, and I know that you're not doing this for you. You're doing this to serve them. What kinds of questions, though, do you ask in order for them to think, oh, they really are interested in us?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first question. Is a very simple little survey. It was, how long you been in the community? What do you like most about living here? We asked, what's one thing you would improve? And then we ask, is anybody working on that right now? And then a follow-up is, if we get people together, would you like to get involved? And then, do you have any questions for me? We're done. And that was it. And because the intent is through those questions, we also find who they think is an actual community leader. Because if somebody's working on something they care about, we want to talk to them. And they're not always the most visible leader. It could be the 50-something-year-old grandmother in the community who everybody trusts. She gets things done. She doesn't run anything except like everything. And the trust factor is high. So we want to go talk to her. Tell me, why do you care about this community so much? And those are unlock the secrets to progress. So it's kind of like a discovery. We call it a year of discovery, and we mean that literally. It's like it's very fun, and because you're kind of like unlocking community history and people's passion and interest, and then we have some events to get people out on their own terms, just having a good time. So we're not saying, this has all got to happen now. There's people that are gonna, we got to change all this. This is what's wrong with you. They know the story about their community, right? And they know it's not totally true.
Right.
There's pieces. There's a couple of blocks in the neighborhood that are full of, you know, active drug dealing things, but the community's relatively quiet.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great people live there, and so they like the fresh air of being, and the wind taken out of here. We're going to find out really, really, really what's wrong with not only community but maybe you, and then we'll fix that.
Yeah.
That's not a very attractive thing for me wanting to get involved.
Exactly.
And it's more like, no, here, let me tell you what I love about this place. And then they'll be happy to say, and I wish we could change this.
Good. Yeah. Good.
In this community, there's a few things that, like, there's a park there across from the stadium. People love it. It has become a regional gathering place for the African American community. We've got the biggest historic black college football game in the country between FAMU and BCU every November. Couple 100,000 people come out of that game. Few of them go into the game. The stadium gets plenty of people, but there's a big active gathering. And then throughout the year, ripple effect is people returning to that park on the weekends. And people want to celebrate that, but also not want it misused. And so how do you come together to, like, find out an idea to move that around? And so that was one of the initiatives. It's
a
now
resident-born initiative.
Resident-born initiative. We found a local champion who lives across the street who remembered playing there as a little girl, and wanted to make sure that was the nicest park in the region. And that's breaking ground probably next month to, like, it. But now that's 4 years ago, so you know, it's a slow process, but big ideas happen from these little conversations.
That's what I want. I kind of want to, Eddie, let me ask you this. Well, Phil's having, or his team, are having all of these conversations. They're amassing information, coming to some sort of analysis that is important insight. You're having conversations with community leaders, you know, concurrent conversations. You're kind of unfolding the vision, you know. What's the vision that you're presenting to Mayor Dyer and to the Chamber of Commerce and the you know, the economic partnerships and so on and so forth? How are you getting them on board? Because everyone knows that if you're going to make a significant change in a certain geography, you've got to get the cooperation of those who make policy, of those who can be contributors. What kind of conversation are you having with them?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think the roles of being able to have conversations both in the neighborhood and outside the neighborhood to figure out how to invest in those within and those without that could make things possible was something that Phil and I sort of tag team on in many ways. There were messages and roles that were important. It was important for me to give face as the untrusted outsider trying to present a good, and then there were times to try to translate what the community was saying to those stakeholders. I will say for us, there was a driving impetus around being something that was born absent of some of the political division that oftentimes erodes progress in these kinds of efforts. And so to admit that, you know, $1 trillion spent on the war on poverty had not made things better, but worse, but that standing aside and letting these communities decline without doing something about it is not the proper response either. So being a business-led effort, that the private sector is starting the conversation, driving the conversation, and then finding the right opportunities to invite our public leaders, our nonprofit leaders to be very crucial parts of the solution, I'd say was a big part of being able to move quickly. So there was not sort of a broad coalition at the onset. And some models are very successful that start out that way. For us, there was a value to say, we want to see business leaders discover the true purpose of power, which I love as a premise for the show here, is that with that power comes great responsibility to leverage it for the good of others who do not have it. And so that, as much as wanting to affect poverty, wanting to really bring meaning to power as an instrument for justice was the heartbeat of Lift Orlando when we started. That these business leaders had a role to play, that they could not abdicate that role to the nonprofit or public community, that they had themselves to figure out how to not just write checks, but roll up their sleeves, figure out how to solve hard problems. So for us, we were really focused on being business-led, and our entire board was focused on, we want business leaders to be on this board. And we will partner with the other sectors, but we feel accountable as the business community to drive the change.
Let me ask that. Let me ask you a question about that. Let me ask you, Phil. What are the metrics of success? I mean, you've got to measure something, and it usually isn't how much money we've raised. It usually isn't what buildings got built. It's, you know, as this proceeds, how do people know that they've really made the difference they intended to make?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's part of our role has three pieces. We do the community engagement work so we can hear the voices, not just the residents, but all the stakeholders as a kind of staple. And then we're going to do evaluation work. Based on what was said and agreed to, are we making progress on those stated goals? And then there's some equiping needs to be done. So my dad was a pastor. Everything's nice, alliterative.
Right, of course.
3 E's, well ingrained in my psyche. So the engagement, the evaluation, and the equipping. And so we're doing all three of those pieces. The evaluation, as a base level, back 10 years ago, when I founded the Institute, we set up what we called a neighborhood stress index. It only had 4 simple things to track because we wanted it to be simple. We wanted it to be relatively inexpensive to update, so we could keep a finger on the pulse of the community at the neighborhood level. And those have variables around safety, income, education, and housing. Just 4. And what we do, we're able to cobble those together into an index and then map them out so we can see hotspots. But once you know the hotspot, you got to find out, we find out from the residents.
Now describe hotspots.
Hotspot is where there's safety is low, income is low, education is low, and housing is not affordable. You know, so that means it's a vulnerability is a hotspot where like people are going to be vulnerable to changes in the economy and different things. And so now we kind of know where to be. We need, you know, the actors in place to want to do investment the right way, do engagement, and then we're going to cobble together with these stakeholders, residents being primary among them, what are the goals for this particular initiative. So in Liv's case, you have agreement on the main outcome, which is increased net worth of the residents. Because it was really clear from the residents there that, you know, this is largely about money. And life is about more than money, but probably if we had more money, you wouldn't be here. So they said that our ability to create wealth for our family is important. And then tracking legacy residents, who were there when it started. So it's wealth for these people is the bullseye. But there's supporting elements to that. So we've got about another 20 metrics. And they kind of lump together around affordability of housing, achievements in education, a mix of incomes that get people from different walks of life interacting, which shows to be a ladder to social mobility, and then a certain amount of wellness. You know, you want people, you don't want a lot of instances of chronic disease. You want people access to healthy fruits and vegetables, and living a long and healthy life. And so that's all on a dashboard that we look at, and we measure that on an annual basis. And then the last piece is there are programs involved that are trying to move the needle. And you've got to track performance of them on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis. So you got annual markers, performance metrics of the programs. And I said the last one, but I'm going to add one more because you got a sweet topic for me. It's just want to show alignment to a model, like a nationally recognized model to make this work that they've put their eggs in the basket of is collective impact. But a lot of people talk about that, not as much done because it's got a lot of moving parts. And so we've created an alignment dashboard that just shows how closely aligned are we to that model in a formal way. So it's alignment, performance, and then the population changes that we see on an annual basis. So very comprehensive suite of metrics.
Okay, we have just a couple of minutes left, but if people wanted to get involved? I don't even. This is so kind of overwhelming, and I know it's in process and all of that kind of stuff. But are there places for people to get involved? You know, I realize this is a community itself effort. Yeah. But are there places for people at least to go to learn what you guys are doing, to see if they can somehow be helpful?
Yeah, a good entry point is the third Wednesday of every month. We have what we call the Metro Orlando Cooperative for neighborhood improvement. So anybody doing neighborhood work across the city,
great.
It's just an easy entry point. Come have lunch. You'll hear a speaker that's got some expertise on a topic of interest, mainly professionals. It's a lunchtime professional development one, but that's a great way to just kind of learn more. Otherwise, LIFT is one of now 12 place-based initiatives in the city.
Fantastic.
10 years ago, there was arguably just one. That was Harris Rosen's work in Tangelo Park. Now there are 11 others have joined and made up a little bit differently, and all with opportunities to kind of get plugged in either with a nonprofit support or additional training. And so we would love people to come to that co-op meeting or just to come to our website, and we'll help plug them in.
Good, and maybe get ideas for their own communities.
Absolutely.
That's phenomenal. Well, we're out of time, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you're doing. It's really model is not the right word, because every neighborhood is unique, and every effort is at least a good intention, and so we want as many of those, even if it's not as organized or as well recognized. But certainly what you're doing is just fantastic for our city. So thank both of you for your leadership.
Thank you very much.
And thank you. Not only do I thank Eddie Morton and Phil Hissam for joining us, but I thank you. Remember, these discussions are just that. They're discussions among us. But we'd love to see you continue the discussions at home or at these Wednesday meetings and get further involved. Because when power talks, you're empowered through the voice of truth. See you next time.
You just watched Power Talks, a Good Life 45 original production that makes you part of our Hope Team here on Good Life 45, where hope happens.